Welcome back to Reading Bear. Today, we will take a look at some new malicious compliance stories. And if you enjoyed my content, please don't forget to subscribe to my channel and post some bear emojis in the comments. Let's go!
The first story is titled, Why You Shouldn't Tell a Child to Do Something You Don't Actually Want Them to Do. So, I was probably like 8 years old when both of these stories happened, but I damn sure did this intentionally on both occasions. Yes, both occasions. My dad didn't learn the first time. The first time it happened, we were on our way home from a road trip, and I've never had an easy time in public bathrooms. No matter how hard I try, I just can't go. We were maybe another 10 to 15 minutes away from our house, but my dad decided that getting cigarettes was more important than anything else at the moment. He took maybe 10 minutes inside the store, and then maybe a minute into the drive home we hit a very long red light. I was crying because I had to pee really bad, and I guess all that my dad had on his brain was being upset because he couldn't smoke in the car, because we started arguing. And the next thing he did was tell me, "God damn it, Op. Just piss yourself and stop whining." Why he thought saying that was a good idea, I will never know. But I listened. I pissed myself and stopped whining like he asked. And, like most parents are concerned by, child had stopped complaining altogether. He stared at me in the mirror in horror. "Are you pissing?" He goes, and I just said no, but I was. And then he threw out my booster seat when we got home. And the second time, a week after last time, I fought insomnia for most of my life. Just so you understand the setting. My dad was chasing me around the house around 10 p.m. due to it being an hour after my bedtime. The last time he put me to bed, he was screaming and I was crying. He grabbed me, shook me, and told me to not get my ass out of bed for anything. Anything? Anything. Not even to go to the bathroom? Piss yourself. Of course, it's not like she didn't do it last time. Well, I made eye contact with him and pissed myself like he said. And he slowly realized that now I cannot go to bed until my sheets are cleaned. He hung his head, sighed, and said, "You win. Get up." That's my story of malicious compliance. The next story is titled, We Talked. I used to work for a company where the majority of the work was done outside of the office on our own. Most staff would go into the office once a week, and since they went in based on what fit their schedule best, there was a chance you might never have met a fellow employee despite you both having worked there for months. One day we had a training session. These would happen around every 3 to 4 months. This meant that all employees were called in. I already knew what we were being trained on, since I had helped the manager on it beforehand. Still, everyone was expected at training including me, so I was there. For the first hour or so everything went like usual. Then we had a break. I headed outside for some fresh air whilst another guy went out for a smoke. We hadn't met before so we introduced ourselves. Turns out we had a lot in common. We got on like a house on fire and both had a similar stupid sense of humor. When we went back inside when they wanted to restart training, we were still chatting. After around 20 minutes, where we had quietly cracked some jokes to each other about the training material, the boss stood up and said, "Guys, there is a Starbucks up the road. Go there, get a drink, and don't come back until you have finished talking." Okay? So, we went to Starbucks. Grabbed a drink each. Chatted about various subjects. Before we knew it, it had gone 5 p.m. Work was done for the day so we went home. 2 days later we were both called into the office. The manager wanted to know why we hadn't returned to training. "You told us to not come back until we had finished talking." Yes? Well, we weren't finished talking. At which point both of us were trying to keep a straight face. The boss looked at us both and sighed. I really should have seen that coming. In the end I trained him up on the stuff we had missed, and we've been really close friends ever since. The next story is titled, Can't Stay Past My Clock Out Time? No problem. This is a story from about 6 years ago, back when I worked as a waitress. All names are fake for the purpose of privacy. The summer between grade 11 and 12, I worked at a small family-owned restaurant about a 20-minute drive from my house. I lived fairly middle of nowhere, so this restaurant and 2 others served basically the whole county. So, even during the dead time of winter, we were often busy. But we're also directly on a path from a big city to a large lake, so we're especially busy in summer. The people that ran the restaurant were a married couple. The wife, Sandra, was generally lovely, but the husband, Marvin, had a very short temper. I think I can count the number of times he talked to me without yelling on one hand. I picked up on the job easily enough. I'm very extroverted and friendly, so a lot of the customers loved me. Sandra decided to train me to do the opening shift at the restaurant. She would stay in the back and help me with prep and other things as I got used to the setting. Marvin was against this from the onset, saying I wasn't there long enough to be taking on this commitment. This malicious compliance took place about midway through June. After 2 weeks with Sandra helping me out, she stops coming by, so I was there with a singular cook until lunch, when I got relieved by another staff member. It just so happens that the next few weeks were going to be gorgeous weather, so my first week without Sandra we get slammed. The waitress that relieves me, Bonnie, is my senior. So, as Sandra and Marvin have told me, Bonnie can ask me to stay to help out, and it's like I'm asking me to stay. Bonnie asks me to stay and help out every day that week. Marvin sees my time clocked in and out and freaks out, saying he knew I wasn't trained enough and that I was using that excuse to get more hours, even though I was getting 25 plus every week and had a second job. I knew better to say anything back, and then he told me I wasn't allowed to stay past my time anymore. I confirm with him that, no matter what, I shouldn't stay past my time. He yells that, unless him or Sandra specifically tell me to stay, I can't stay past my time. I smile and tell him no problem. So, I'm opening all of next week, and like the week before we're slammed. It looks like there's going to be no reprieve as my time to clock out comes. I tell Bonnie I'm leaving, and, like usual, she asks me to stay. I shrug and said Marvin told me explicitly I couldn't take her word for asking me to stay. Bonnie is pissed. She agrees that I can leave, and she phones Sandra and Marvin. Sandra phones me and asks me if I can come back, but I'm already at home at this point and I refuse. So, her and Marvin have to leave their house to go help out. I come into work the next morning to open, and both Sandra and Marvin are there. Marvin starts yelling at me about how I just left when it was so busy. And I calmly remind him I was told to leave unless him or Sandra specifically requested it. He's grumpy and says I should know what he meant. So, I ask if I can take the relieving waitstaff's word for asking me to stay. He disagrees and instead I have to phone him before I leave. Sandra starts arguing with him, saying that's ridiculous and to just let us make the judgment call as we're the ones out there and know what's happening. But Marvin is sticking to his guns and Sandra just rolls her eyes and walks away. So obviously, here comes Malicious Compliance Part 2. I phone him at the end of every one of my shifts, even when I have to close or it's dead. I always said I just wanted to be sure this time, since he was so upset last time. This lasts for a little over a week before he finally gives up and says, it's fine if I or another waitstaff make a judgment call to stay past the time if it's busy. The next story is titled, Can I Talk to Someone Who Knows Things? Like a Man? This popped into my mind recently. I used to work at a retail tropical fish store, and weird as it is, we were very well known. We used to provide the aquarium with rare fish and people used to drive from 2 to 3 states over if they were true fish people to come buy from us. I, at the time 17F, was an expert in tropical fish and koi. In fact, it was my job that summer to be the koi and outdoor pond point person, and my job was not only stocking the ponds, but managing all the plants, caring for them, and knowing every bit of information and all the prices of the various koi and goldfish we had. I knew diets, temperature ranges, places of origin, special breeds, I knew it all. They even would call me with questions on my days off. That clearly did not matter to one customer though. He came inside the store and asked for some help with koi outside. I happily agreed as I was the only person not on my lunch break. Now this guy frankly seemed put off by me offering to help. So instead of buying anything, he decided to quiz me for 20 minutes about the koi, goldfish and pond plants to try to get me to admit I didn't know something. I answered every single one of his stupid questions, some really were stupid, and at the end of the 20 minutes he had the balls to say, "Can I talk to someone who knows things? Like a man?" Full emphasis in tone on those words too. "Sure you can," I say with a fake smile, "let me get John for ya." Here's the malicious compliance. John, name changed, was 75, retired, annoying as hell and batcrap crazy. My boss didn't even want him to be hired, but he owed John a favor. Now John is an expert in goldfish, but he hates koi and outside ponds. John also, like I said, is really annoying and crazy, but he had a soft spot for me, so we always would chat. I went inside to find John, and explained to him that this customer wanted a man to talk to. John asked me why he wanted to speak to a man when I was the pond point person, and I told him that he clearly just didn't like that he was speaking to a girl. John nods knowingly, gets this evil grin on his face, and goes to help the customer. 5 minutes later, I hear a man yelling in the parking lot. I run outside and find the customer screaming at John and cursing him out. "What is wrong with you? Does nobody ducking know anything around here? I will never come back. You're all horrible and know nothing about fish, and you're a terrible employee," or something to that effect. I watch the guy hop into his car, slam the door and drive off. I asked John what happened. He said, "Oh yeah, no." Every time he asked me a question I said, not sure, good question though. I could go get up and ask, she's really our pond expert, and apparently he did not like that the next story is titled, "He'll be right with you." I, female, work in the male-dominated industry of construction as an estimator and project manager. That's pretty much the background necessary. I am one of 2 estimators in my office. One day, a man walked in and I went to greet him as the office manager was out and the other estimator was on the phone. When I asked him how could I help him, he asked if he could speak to someone who knew what they were talking about. I tried not to be instantly irritated and explained to him that I was an estimator and could give him a price. He said, "This is rather complicated, so is there a guy here that will understand this?" I had seen his drawings, and knew it was a rather easy job. Instead I told him Bob would be right with him and to have a seat. Told Bob he had a customer waiting. Bob informed me he'd be on the phone for at least another half hour. "Sorry Bob, the customer has requested to wait for you." An hour goes by and Bob comes in my office as asked why I didn't help that guy because the job was so easy. I told him the story, and he said fair enough and walked out. The next story is titled Getting Exactly What Is Ordered. For background, he started his job at a popular pizza chain, and was with 3 other employees, Alicia, Kaylee, and Jess, all 3 of whom were easygoing young women who were showing him the ropes. It was a busy day, and in walks our future Karen. But at the time she was seemingly nice, and even left a small tip for initial order, wings and a pizza. Cut to about an hour later, she calls and Jason is the one managing the phone. She tells him that her pizza was completely undercooked and disgusting and it tastes as if someone has just poured an entire pile of butter on it. And she demands a new pizza be delivered to her home for her for free. Keep in mind that 1. She initially came in to pick up her first order, and 2. This pizza place has a delivery fee. So, Jason, unsure what to do because it is his 3rd day, calls over his co-worker, Jess, and they were talking about what to do for this situation. And meanwhile, he is still on the phone, keeping her on hold, and Jess says to him that if she wants it, she'll have to come back to the store to get it. So, Jess goes to start the pizza, and Jason informs Karen that they were not able to deliver, but they still were able to honor her request. Her last words before hanging up were a snippy, "Fine. I'll go there and I'll make a scene." Jason informs Jess of what she said, and she takes the pizza that almost went in the oven and throws it right away. "I'm not making that idiot her pizza. WTG Jess." Out walks the shift leader, Kaylee, who asks why Jess threw away that pizza. Jason catches the shift leader up to speed, and Kaylee just sorta shrugs it off. Cut to another hour later. Karen comes storming in, her previous box of pizza in hand, slightly more in disarray than she previously had been. Jason says, knowing who she is, "Hi, how can I help you?" "Hi, I'm here for my pizza." Kaylee steps in at the moment and asks, "Are you the woman from the phone?" "Of course. Look at this," she says haughtily, and opens the pizza box, revealing the already half-eaten cheese pizza that didn't have anything wrong with it. Kaylee responds, "I don't care, did you threaten my employee?" Clearly taken aback by this accusation, Karen exclaims in self-defense, "No, of course not. No one threatened anyone." "Okay. Well, he says otherwise." Karen insists she did nothing wrong. "I said my pizza was undercooked and calmly asked for a new one." Jason shakes his head, "Ma'am, I'm sorry, but that's not what you said." Karen, now being caught in a lie for some reason, now says, "I wasn't even the one who called." Alicia steps in, then pulls Jason over to the side while Kaylee and Karen continue, and says, "Alright, we're just gonna pretend to do something and listen in on this." Karen's final words on the matter before Kaylee gives in to end up remaking her pizza are, "My kids are starving. This is not acceptable." And so they begin to make her pizza. Karen complained it was underdone, so they are extra careful to be sure the crust was burnt and hard. She complained that it was too much garlic on the crust. So they place none on, and leave it bland for her. No oil is in sight. When they give her the pizza, Jason smiles, she opens it and sees the disaster of a pizza, looks up with disgust, realizes she's not going to win against 4 young people who refuse to be treated like garbage by customers, and leaves in defeat. She calls corporate, so he's heard. But nothing will probably come of it. Hope your starving kids enjoyed the wings that you didn't bring in. The next story is titled, "My section sergeant was a dick to me, and it came back to bite him in the ass." I was a sergeant in the army and was part of a unit that was about to have a big ceremony to change what patch we wore on our uniform sleeves. During our first formation of the day, my boss made a big deal about how Sergeant LSCRX is flagged for dental, meaning there is some dental thing that I am overdue or will be overdue in the near future. Now, this was the first time he had said anything to me, and I wasn't past due on anything. I was just coming up on my annual cleaning or something. Instead of just mentioning it to me one-on-one, he decided to make a big deal about it in front of our entire section and demanded that I leave right then to go take care of it. Not one to argue with a senior NCO, I took off to the dental clinic a short drive away, with no appointment. I knew that we had a ceremony that afternoon for our new uniform patch, and I had no desire to participate if I could avoid it. The ceremony was going to involve several hours of us standing in formation, practicing to stand in formation, lots of people reading speeches while we stood in formation, and then everybody would remove the old Velcro patch and put on the new patch. Yay. Well, it took a while to get in for an exam at the dentist, and by the time I was laying in the exam room, my phone started buzzing regularly with texts from my boss asking where I was. These messages were getting angrier and angrier as they were practicing for the ceremony, and his boss wanted everyone there for it. I eventually messaged him back that I was still at the dentist, and that I would head over as soon as they were finished clearing me. Bad news, the dentist said that I needed a couple of fillings and would have to schedule an appointment. I asked her if there was any way they could do them today if I was prepared to wait, and she said yes. Several hours later, I called my boss from the dentist's office to let him know I was finished. He was livid that I had missed the entire ceremony, and he demanded that I bring a document with me outlining everything the dentist had to do and why. I told the dentist this. Keep in mind, she is also in the army and outranks my boss by an order of magnitude, and she was pissed that he would ask for my personal medical information like that. Instead, she took one of the pre-printed notes that they give children as an excuse for missing school, and crossed out that student, and wrote Sergeant along with my name and the date. I made sure to hand the note to him in front of our section and reminded him that I went on the day of the ceremony because he ordered me to. The next story is titled, Malicious Walmart Compliance. So I used to work at a Walmart supercenter. It was my first job. I eventually ended up working what's called one-touch. Basically, these large boxes come off the line full of loose items, vitamins, shampoo, dog toys, etc., basically just stuff that the packaging broke on in the warehouse, or that were too small to put in separate boxes, and I have to sort through them and put them in corresponding tubs. The tubs were labeled with a certain type of product, within departments, which after I was done, I stacked on pallets or flat carts and took out to the sales floor. The management at this particular Walmart was absolutely horrible. There are multiple stories of them just not giving a crap about the employees or the customers. For instance, they once told me to put a ruined pack of protein drink mix, a box of those little paper pouches, in the stuff to go to the floor. The box was ripped open, half of the pouches were missing, and the rest were soaked to the point of dripping in fabric dye. A bottle in the box that box was in had broken open. I was told, by a manager, to prioritize making the store money over customer safety. I was going to put that box in claims, damaged or destroyed items, SP we could get something back for it. Don't worry, the malicious compliance story is next. I'm just telling the story of why I left. After that, I decided no, walked over to the trash compactor, tossed it in, and crushed it. Now for the compliance story. I had already put in my notice, a 3-day notice, as I had got a new job sooner than expected, and I was on my last day. Now the management would often force me to sort through the returns as well, and I'd see the same broken items multiple times, because half the people in that store won't do their damn jobs. Even some of the people on my team were incompetent, and even destroyed store property and/or were caught stealing, and put them in my boxes to take to the floor. Now this particular day was extremely busy, and I was working overtime, and was completely exhausted. I had already worked 2.5 hours after my shift was supposed to end. And here comes management with not one, not two, but 7 buggies, shopping carts, overflowing with returns. I asked if they could be done tomorrow by someone else, since I was already overtime, exhausted, and started my next job in 8 hours. This would have taken me at least an hour and a half to do. They said, and I'm directly quoting, "No, these returns must be on pallets and on the sales floor before you leave." Cue malicious compliance. After the manager walked away, I put my plan into action. I was planning on leaving the store on a high note anyways, and got 7 pallets. 4 of the carts I just put up on the pallets, and for the other 3, I dumped their entire contents onto a pallet. I then took those pallets out to the sales floor, and put them in random locations all over the store. Then I clocked out, and handed in my name tag. As I was leaving, I could hear one of the managers, the one we called the idiot, who got pissy over everything, even about us getting done early, screaming for me to come back and do my job properly. I just said, "It's not my job anymore, idiot," and walked out the door while flipping her off. I then proceeded to do a few donuts in the parking lot in my truck to piss people off even more. Now I know I really screwed the night shift over, but damn was it satisfying to see the look on that manger's face when I told her off. The next story is titled, "You Don't Want Me to Talk to You?" Okay. This happened a few years ago now. I had just started teaching after finishing graduate school, and one of the co-chairs for my department, I'm a high school science teacher, was on a major power trip. And because I was the new guy, I guess she decided I would be an easy target. The thing that finally pushed me over the edge was when she told me that under no circumstances was I allowed to talk to any teacher in the building unless they taught the same subject I did. As a sim who was just starting out and needed all the help I could get, this seemed like a problem, but actually turned out to be one of the best things that happened while I was working there. Now, not only was her order totally unenforceable, it was also a major breach of district and school policy. And for any of you who have worked in education, you understand how a school district tends to react to things like that, especially when it also involves the harassment of an employee. But rather than report it immediately to my assistant principal, I decided to bide my time, and use my department chair's own words to destroy her. And so begins my evil plan. As a beginning teacher, I was required to submit weekly lesson plans to my and the department chair. At the beginning of the year, I had emailed my to ask him if I needed both co-chairs to sign off on the plans. Since we all had different schedules, I was worried I wouldn't get them back in time to make changes if they were needed. He wrote back saying that as long as he and at least one of the chairs signed off, there were no problems. With the email in hand, I had everything I needed. I continued submitting my lesson plans to the and the other department chair as I had been, but took the other's name off the emails. My lessons continued getting approved and everything was fine for a month or 2. Then I get a call to report to the AP's office, because he needs to speak with me. I walk in and there she is, standing next to his desk with this smug, crap-eating smirk on her face. Before the who we both report to, can say anything, she starts demanding to know why I haven't been submitting my lesson plans and insists that the write me up and take disciplinary action immediately for my failure to follow policy. He tells her that I have been submitting all of my lesson plans on time and pulls them up on his computer to show her the email chain between us. She turns to me, her face turning redder and redder. I thought that vein bulging in her forehead was going to burst. Then I demand you write him up for not communicating his lessons with me as per policy. I'm the department chair. That's when I made my move. As innocently as can be, I say to the but I don't understand the problem. I did exactly what she told me to. She looked like she was about to have a stroke. In her best "I want to see your manager" voice, she says, "And when, exactly, did I tell you not to send you lessons to me?" Me, still ignoring her and as calm and respectful as can be, "Well, I was told that I was only allowed to speak to teachers that teach the same subject I do. I teach biology, and so does the department chair I've been submitting lesson plans to. My other department chair," I gestured at her, still not looking at her, "teaches earth science, which isn't my subject. So, it was my understanding that I wasn't supposed to talk to her." For a full 10 seconds, you could have heard a pin drop in that room. Both of their jaws dropped. The app was the first to recover. He turned to her and asked, "Sounds to me like he followed your instructions to the letter. Instructions that you and I are going to have a serious talk about." She goes white, realizing how much trouble she's in. At this point, both myself and the app are trying desperately not to start laughing. She rounds on me. Her, "Why you little smartass?" Me, cutting her off, "I'm sorry, but I'm not supposed to talk to you." She screams like a banshee and storms out of the office. My app is laughing so hard he can barely breathe, and I go and have my lunch. But she did get her wish. There was disciplinary action taken. After the harassment, the violation of policy, and storming out of the office which caused a scene in front of several parents and students, she was removed as department chair. She lost her authority and the extra pay that came with it. I was brought homemade muffins and thank you card from the rest of the department for getting us all out from under that witch. And you know, I never did bother to ask if I was allowed to talk to her after that. If you enjoyed the video, please subscribe to the channel and post some bear emojis in the comment.